start recording. And I will just quickly say welcome again. We're glad that you're here to Mid-Kentucky's Digital Worship webinars. This is the fourth in a series of 4, and we have some new presenters today. We have folks from Video Solutions, Mike Little, and I'll let them introduce themselves and go ahead and get started. The intent of this particular webinar is to try to actually get to some nuts and bolts about what are some materials that you can use, hardware, software, to improve your digital worship experience for both those who are viewing it and also most particularly for those who are producing it. So I will turn things over now to Video Solutions.
All right, good morning. First, thanks, John, for bringing us in on this. We appreciate it. And we look forward to working with everybody individually. So I think that I watched the 3 sessions that Worship Times did, and they were excellent. So our disclaimer is that we're technical guys, and our presentation is probably not going to be as slick. Yeah. But I'll transfer some of this information, and then hopefully people will interact and ask questions or get clarifications. But I think what it'll do is it'll get us all kind of on the same page so that when we come to your church, we don't have to reinvent the wheel with everybody. We kind of have a starting point. So is this up? No. Okay. So I'm calling the presentation Video Production and Live Streaming Hardware. It's really live streaming hardware, but the production element's been covered pretty well already, but we'll touch on that again a little bit. So
do you all see the presentation now?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so you can go to the next one. So for context, guess I'll tell you a little bit about us. Our company is a small company. I'm Mike Little. This is Matt Little. Obviously, it's a family business. So, but we have a number of associates. But we're a small company. But I think we do some pretty fantastic things for the size of our company. So we were established in 1997, and I was in the industry quite a while before that. So I think I did my first video conference in '93, and it was on the order of $500,000, I believe, and the quality was not that great. So the technology's come a long way, and what we have to do as a company is keep changing and adapting with the technology. So our experience is broad. We've done a lot of things over the years. So you see there are churches, corporate AV, museums, like fully interactive museums, TV studios, podcasting studios. A small job for us is $300. A big job for us is $1 million. So the reason I'm saying this is I want you to have confidence that we'll help you work through to the right solution for your church. So if I had to characterize our business, I'd say we're primarily or predominantly corporate AV, and within that experience, we've done a lot of things. So demanding clients, and I think we've delivered. So, but in our business, we're called systems integrators. So we basically look at what a customer needs, consult with the customer, and then we typically design the system, provide the hardware, build the system, and provide the service when the system's complete. So we can act as a pure consultant, which is perfectly fine. But I just wanted to give you that background. That's the way we normally work. So we're not bound to any manufacturers, we're free agents. You know, we're going to try and pick the best solution for your situation. So in looking at you know, live streaming for churches, you know, ease of use is like something that we work on constantly for all of our customers, because that's really what everybody wants. So that's very important, I think. Signal quality is important. I think Worship Times talked about it, and they said it well, that, you know, the video is important, but the audio is really critical, because you can have some video hiccups and get through it, but if the audio is not right, it's, you know, you're going to lose people. So that they really need to both be there, because in some of the streaming events I've seen, it's like lip sync is important. It's really distracting when the lip sync's way off. You want your audio levels to be consistent. If the music's loud and the pastor's quiet, that's not good. I mean, it really needs to be good. And so when you say seamless production, well, it is. No matter how you look at it, it really is a production. So, you know, we want to help you make that as good as it can be. And then the other thing that I think is important is that the hardware is not obtrusive. Like, a lot of things that are ideal from a technical standpoint are not ideal in the church. So you have to make good equipment choices and choose to place equipment in areas where it's least obtrusive. And sometimes that involves maybe, you know, a little bit better camera, you know, some wiring considerations and that sort of thing. So, but that's the goal. So also I'm sure that we'll get to know all of the churches very well, but it truly is a customized system. And, you know, I mean, there are so many choices on hardware, software, you know, budget, just basically trying to match the solution to your situation and what you want. And that would be like, I'm sure during COVID, there's, you know, the immediate response, and then there's what you're trying to do in the near term, and then what you're trying to do in the longer term. And so we want to make that part of the decision-making process, is to have systems that are scalable and will grow. If you choose to grow that you don't have to start over, you can continue to use and add to what you've purchased. So there's so many choices, but what we're going to try to do is distill it down into a couple of scenarios that hopefully everybody can relate to. And then when we're actually working with you, we want to, you know, we'll work hard to help you make good decisions, you know, for your specific situation. So production, again, this was all talked about previously, but, you know, I'm kind of thinking of it in terms of a couple of scenarios. And so you've got your pre-production scenario where, hey, I'm not sure what everybody's doing right now, but where you're producing your Sunday worship prior to Sunday, and then just archiving it or streaming it. And then this is really the easiest, lowest cost approach, but it's labor intensive because of, you know, it has to be edited, and you've got to gather up all of your content and edit the content together and then stream it. The next scenario would be live streaming, which is kind of where we're going to keep the emphasis today. And it's so that would be where you have church members returning, but you're going to stream it live. Or the last option there is you are having church, you're acting like you're streaming it live, but you're basically recording it, and then you'll put it on your website, later. So those last two, the actual live streaming or the live recording, they're very close in what it takes to do those two. So we'll focus on the live streaming, and then we'll see where your questions are at later. So a couple of the basics here. With live streaming hardware, there's software-based devices and there's hardware-based devices. And we'll show you a little bit of that today, but in general, people are using PCs, and the entire system is only going to be as good as the weakest link. So that's, the PC, the internet connection, all your peripheral devices that are connected to the PC. It's only going to be as good, it needs to all be good so that it can be trouble-free. And then you're streaming, of course, as discussed, you're streaming to Facebook Live or YouTube or a private streaming service. And not sure what your familiarity level is with those, but there's a lot of streaming services out there. Some of them are targeted to churches. They're usually, you have to pay. And so their services and rates are all over the place, but that's definitely an option. So in this live streaming system, you're going to have 1, 2, or 3 cameras. And the important part, one very important buzzword here is the USB ports, because virtually everything is going to USB as far as AV goes. So so if you have a camcorder and it's got an HDMI output, it has to be converted to USB to get to the computer. And then, and the same is true with once you go beyond one camera, or if you've got one camera and you've got graphics, then you're going to have some sort of a switcher, and there's hardware switchers and there's software switchers, but we're going to probably emphasize all of the PC-based stuff. So, did I miss anything in there?
No.
Okay. So let's talk about cameras and lighting. The webcam there at the top, that's the lowest cost. We don't recommend it. I'm on a webcam right now, which I hope the image looks pretty good, but I'm 4 feet away from it, and you can see what a wide shot it is. So you really need the places that you would want to put that camera for an appropriate shot would be intrusive. It would have to be right out there in front somewhere. So we shy away from that unless the budget dictates it. So really, when you're talking about in the sanctuary, doing this live or live to a recording, we feel like the starting point is really a pan tilt zoom camera, like the next picture there. And those cameras, you can see the remote control. You can control them with that remote, and so you can point it in any direction. They have zoom capability, so that allows you to zoom in, zoom out, kind of change the look during the service. And that particular camera is relatively low cost, pan tilt zoom USB camera. So that camera has a 12x lens. So you have, like, these are just typical lens choices here, but that's zoom 12 times, 20 times, 30 times. So if you are choosing camera, we'll help you choose camera locations. Let's say, for example, your audio board is in the booth or, you know, in the balcony far away. That particular camera probably doesn't have enough zoom to give you a tight shot of the pastor. It would be more just a wide shot of the front of the church. So, so you really, if you choose to put that camera with the audio board, and the audio board is typically in the back, then you might want a camera that's got a little more zoom, like a 20x or a 30x. So if you locate the cameras up front, you know, if you have good camera locations and places to put them that are unobtrusive, that's great, but you have to take into consideration that there's a distance limit for USB. So it requires, there are extenders that converts the USB to like a Cat 5 or a Cat 6 wire. And then that goes back to your PC. And those cameras, that particular camera requires power. So you have to have an electrical outlet adjacent to it. So if it's up with your audio board, you've probably got power available and you don't have a distance issue with the USB, but you probably don't have the best shot unless you go with a little higher power zoom. So cameras, all of this equipment, there's a wide range of choices and there's a wide range of performance. And the PTZ camera that's shown there, we've used a ton of them in training rooms and boardrooms, and they work great for that. Depending on the size of the church, they may or may not be appropriate. So, and then there's also a couple of other cameras out there. There's an interesting one that's got a 2-in-1 design that's designed to be at the back, you know, to be mounted in the back, and it has a static wide shot, and then it has the pan tilt zoom shot. So you're actually getting two cameras for one in that scenario, and you can switch between them. So again, if you're talking, you know, I'm guessing that there's a wide variety of sizes of churches, the age of the church. There may be wiring challenges. There is hardware on the market that's has wireless capability, but you really have to look at all that very carefully because the reliability of a hardwired connection is really hard to beat. So if you had a wiring challenge that cannot be overcome, then you might want to go with a camera that will run over your network wirelessly. But we tend to stay away from that if we can. But we've been in quite a few churches, and sometimes there's some really challenging issues as far as getting from point A to point B. So, and then as I said, this particular camera has to plug in. There are cameras that run on your network, and they're power over Ethernet, which means they're powered through the Cat 5 cable. And there's a version of those cameras called NBI, which is like a standardized network cable, basically, that makes it interchangeable with some of the other equipment. So in general, those solutions cost more, but they're definitely worth mentioning if there's some difficult challenges to get good camera angles. And lighting, lighting's kind of a separate discussion. If you have some cameras are more forgiving than others for a given lighting situation. Worship Times talked about it a little bit. Church lighting is usually dramatic or theatrical lighting, and the cameras don't see that the way the human eye sees it. So it can present challenges. Kind of have to take those by the ones. They are, but some cameras are a little more forgiving. And obviously, if you wanted to make a minor lighting change, it's not that big of a deal. But if you're trying to relight the entire church, that's really expensive. So we'll basically go over that with you individually at your church.
Did you want to talk about the tracking camera?
Yep. Tracking camera is really cool. Sorry, I missed that. The tracking camera, it's a pan-tilt zoom camera that's automatic, and you can program it to follow. So, you know, if you're a pastor that walks around a lot, the camera will actually follow you without anybody having to intervene. And then all of these pan-tilt zoom cameras you can get a optional controller for them where, you know, when you get into a multi-camera setting where if it's not an auto tracking camera, you can still control. Like if you had a 3-camera system, you could have a controller. We've got a picture of it coming up later, but and control those cameras. But the tracking camera is cool. But again, you know, if you buy a camera with a 30x lens and it's a tracking camera, that's going to be significantly more than this PTZ camera that I've got shown on the screen. So it really boils down to whatever budget you have, how you want to spend that. And that's what we want to help you with, is making the best choices. So the next thing is audio. And I can't see you guys right now, so hopefully everybody's still there. So the PC that's streaming out, you have to bring all of these media assets in. So the camera's gonna, if it's a camcorder, you're gonna have a capture device, and then it's gonna go USB to your computer. If you buy one of these cameras that are USB pan-tilt zoom cameras, then it's already USB, and those will connect directly. As far as the audio goes, you've got to take an audio feed off your board and feed it into the computer so it can stream it out. So that's what this device is an example of. You know, this will convert. You would take like an aux bus or a mixed bus out of your audio board and connect it to this, and then this connects to the computer, and that's how your audio gets to the streaming computer. So if you start to think about that, you know, a lot of the stuff centering around wherever your audio console is. And then, you know, the camera position is going to be based on how many cameras you've got and what your options are for camera placement in the sanctuary. So, but the audio, fairly straightforward, and it's a device that you can use this one or something similar to this.
I would just say that this piece of equipment, you would need an audio board before it. So I'm not sure what the situation is with each church, but I would assume that most churches have an audio mixer that have multiple microphones, maybe for the band or for the pastor, running into that board. And then we would be taking an output of that board and running it into this device to get it to the computer. But it requires having that board beforehand. So
right. And I can't say, and we've got you guys muted, but I'm guessing everybody has an audio console, but you know, maybe not. So, and then everything we're showing you here is really kind of, I would say, industry leading or widely deployed. And
Do you want to take any questions or
Yeah, can you switch back to the other view?
maybe?
Yeah, I'd say it's a good time for questions if anybody is willing to speak up.
That's fine if no one has any questions.
John, they can all unmute themselves, right?
Right, they have the power to unmute themselves or raise their hands, and I'll try to recognize them too, or in whatever way, either physically or through the Zoom itself.
I'm just tired of hearing the sound of my own voice, so I was hoping somebody would speak up.
I wanted to ask a question about that very last bit about the getting the audio to the computer. If my soundboard can just do an auxiliary cable into the computer, does that device provide more than what would just be going on there?
No, if you're a lot of newer mixers actually have USB outputs on them. So if your mixer already has that USB output,
You can't.
My
He's talking
computer's got the stereo input that's currently what I use, is just straight from mixing
Right.
board auxiliary cable and just the sound card built into the computer. I'm just curious if that box somehow enhances the sound, or maybe, I guess it gives you more volume control, but
Yeah.
it's a little bit more robust. I mean, it's they're pretty inexpensive devices, but they're used in recording music typically, and live production like this. But you're going to have probably more reliable of source, and you're going to have more control over the audio without having to fuss around with settings and windows. You know, if you got your live stream mix up and running, you don't want to have to pull up, your sound control panel on your computer to adjust volume levels and things like that. So,
gotcha. That makes sense. I mean,
And I can't say for sure, but it may be a little more forgiving in terms of like headroom and clipping.
Yeah.
So, but if it works and it works fine for you, that's fine.
sure. I mean, I like the idea of simplifying it. One of the challenges I'm having right now is trying to take this new setup that we've invented in the last 3 months and turn it into something that somebody else can help with. And so
Right.
if things like that hardware box, it just gives you a volume knob instead of, like you said, having to bring up a control panel to do the same thing. I just wasn't sure if what all features that kind of box I should even be looking for in something like that. If it's really just better control over volume, or if it's providing more features, like, I don't know. I mean, there wasn't any kind of equalizer on there or anything like that. So I don't know. I was just curious.
yeah. And I believe on this particular one, you might not see EQ on the front panel there, but there is software on your computer that you can run to adjust EQ, and there's a few other features on there as well.
Thank you.
Good question.
All right.
Anybody else? Guess we'll forge on. Okay, so the now what we're going to talk about a little bit is like, how much switching do you need? You know, do you need to switch between one camera, two cameras, three cameras? Do you have graphics? Do you have graphics that you're using now that you want to include? There's going to be some level of switching required. So, in the most simplest scenario, which is an iPad or an iPhone streaming, parked on a tripod streaming, you don't need any of this. But as soon as you get into a little bit more sophisticated system, you're going to have to switch. And there's hardware switching and there's software switching, and again, there's a multitude of products. This particular one called vMix seems like it's really popular, and we've looked at it. I think there's a 30-day demo on it.
Mm-hmm.
Free 30-day demo. and it looks like a pretty good product, and it seems to be very popular with churches. And so this is something you might want to look at right away, is just download the demo and take a look at it. But it's basically set up like it does more than just switching. So you could actually have graphic elements loaded in. That the way that what you're seeing there on screen is like a preview in a program. So whatever's on programs, what's going out on your live stream, and you can use the preview to set up the next thing you're going to switch to. But it'll do, it'll do much more, and you can stream with it, you can record with it, you can switch, you can add graphics. It's pretty powerful, and I think it starts at there's a range of levels of price, but I think it starts at $60, and it goes up to about $1,200. So, and the $1,200 one, you probably don't need everything that it does. But this is, as far as the software-based system, like on a PC, this looks pretty good. So, I thought about running the demo on this webinar, but I would just suggest that you go to YouTube and find some of the vMix demos. And it's pretty cool, and it works pretty good. So, and that's really going to be, as far as your AV team, that's probably going to be the one that they're going to have to learn. And I think in our world, it's fairly straightforward, but this is the piece where who's ever running that needs to know how to run it. But it's also where a lot of the power comes from, as far as getting a professional look. And then the picture below is just that's a camera controller for an Aver. Aver's one of the leading brands of handheld zoom cameras. That's their control panel for controlling. You can control one camera with it if you want to, but if you're doing 2 cameras or 3 cameras, that's an example of, there could be a person that was just running the cameras potentially. Yeah. Or you could set up the shots and just use the same shots, just switch back and forth between them. So, I think I'll let Matt go through these, and maybe I'll chime in here and there. But so we're going to look at 3 levels. The simple, which doesn't require much discussion. The intermediate level, which I think is where most are going to be. And then the advanced level, which would be like a big church, with the budget that can do it.
So yeah, I mean, when we say simple setup, this is something to basically get you going. I'm sure you all are already doing this, and that's just basically using a smartphone or a tablet or a laptop with a webcam built into it and just streaming straight to Facebook. And that's like the most basic version of a live stream that you can get, but it's not going to give you the most professional look. So these next couple of options are going to show you, some better options. So in an intermediate system, the budget plays a larger role. It's going to be a little bit more expensive. You're going to have to invest into it, but you're going to get better performance in the long run. So this system would be like a 1 camera system, where you would have 1 camera shot, maybe zoomed in on the pastor in the scenario. So you could use a webcam like that first one that we showed you, but like we said, it's really for close-up shots only, so it would have to be right in front of the pastor, and that's probably not going to look good if you've got an actual service going on with people on site. And so the other options are what we've talked about with the pan tilt zoom cameras with the zoom lenses. and then also utilizing that audio interface that we just talked about and the vMix software on a computer. So here's a quick block diagram that I drew up to kind of illustrate how this is all connected. So basically you've got the main thing is the Windows PC. You can use Mac as well. We typically stick to the Windows realm because they're more affordable. So a Windows PC, has a monitor, mouse and keyboard, and a bunch of USB ports. And that computer is running the vMix software. And then the vMix software is what handles the recording and also the live streaming. And it can do both simultaneously. There are other software versions out there besides the vMix. So, depending on your specific scenario and budget, that's something that we can look into for you. So connected to this PC, you've got this Logitech webcam. That was that pan tilt zoom camera that we showed you. And you've got this USB audio interface connected as well. So it's fairly simple setup, not a lot of hardware requirements there. And I think maybe the biggest challenge would be running the cables, depending on where your camera shots are set up. And
So if you, like in this scenario, if you look at it, if your audio console's in a place where the camera makes sense to be at the audio console, the wiring's very simple here. And even if you have to locate the camera somewhere else, it's still a pretty simple system, but you would have to have the additional items to extend the USB
Right.
over a long distance.
So an advanced PC design is very similar to that last design, but it would have multiple cameras as an option.
And I think there's a lot of similarity here. It's just they would be pushing the vMix a little harder.
Right.
And that's what we like about it is scalability. I mean, it's pretty powerful. So you can use it in a very basic way, but then when you are ready to do more as far as rolling in videos or doing titles or whatever, it'll do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and using multiple cameras and that sort of thing can be upgraded in the future. That's the beauty of this PC-based system is that to get you started, you could say get a computer and one camera and just do one wide shot from the back of the church. And then maybe later on down the road, you could get another camera with a better zoom, or you could relocate the camera with some extension equipment. You could get a better mixer, with this PC-based scenario, it doesn't have to be everything at once. It could be upgraded in steps to something that maybe would suit your budget better. So here's another diagram of what that would look like. And it's basically the same as the last, except you've got multiple cameras here. And so these cameras would be connected back to the computer, and depending on the distance, you would need that extension equipment. And you could also potentially have the tracking camera, whatever works for your scenario. This system, might have a camera controller, and that would give someone the ability to change the shots throughout the service, and that would maybe make things look a little bit more professional on the live stream.
And so at this point, this is basically a TV production.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we've got Matt's got Aver cams on there, that's a brand, Aver. The Logitech, Aver, PTZ Optics, they're all comparable and pretty popular.
So there is another option that's not PC
You go
based.
one more slide and there's a picture.
Okay, yeah. I'll go to this slide first. So this is kind of a higher end system that would be for maybe a larger church, or someone with a larger budget that wants, the highest end quality possible for a live stream. This brand, NewTek, makes these TriCasters, and they're used all over the world. They're used in ESPN, they're used in high-end TV production.
And it's basically a studio in a box.
Yeah.
And the quality is good enough that the networks use them.
Yeah. So they do make this TriCaster Mini version, which is just as robust, runs the same software. It's just as powerful as their other options, but you're just limited on inputs and outputs. So with this TriCaster Mini, you've got 4 HDMI inputs, and then 4 network inputs. You've got this hardware switcher, which allows you to basically switch your shots at the press of a button, as opposed to having to use your mouse on the computer. You've got this T-bar that allows you to fade between shots, do dissolves and fades and other special effects going from one shot to another. It allows you to load videos straight to the TriCaster, so you can have videos preloaded and ready to roll at the click of a button. It can even automatically roll the video that you've got when you switch to that shot in the program. You can load graphics on this thing. You can put downstream key in, and that's basically putting a graphic over another shot. So say you've got your camera shot and you want to put the pastor's name up, or you want to put the scripture chapter,
Music.
music, anything like that. You can overlay on top of the camera, and that's really gonna kind of amp up your system. Do you have anything?
I was just going to say that these are really nice, and really, we're calling this the high end, but they're affordable for what they do. And they're pretty widely deployed in the corporate world, even in like auditoriums and large meeting spaces.
So I'm going to go back to this drawing real quick, just to kind of show you how you could set that up. With the TriCaster, they utilize that NDI technology, which is network-based video. So that would allow you to put cameras in the sanctuary or even off-site, as long as you can get to it through your network. So say you wanted to put a camera, say you had a gymnasium or something like that, and you put a camera in the gymnasium, you could network that back to this TriCaster and be able to use that as a source, beyond just the cameras in the sanctuary. So that really gives you a lot of flexibility. You can also have another computer plugged straight into the HDMI input on this, and that would give another person the ability to pull up a YouTube video or something like that if you wanted to show something out to show some memes
Right.
out to your stream. So
Yeah, and then one other thing that I didn't have a slide for is, and I'm not sure what you're doing now, but it's video editing software. And I know a lot of churches use like versions of editing software that are free. I think in the case of all of the software in general, the free versions of it are pretty stripped down, and they really just want to entice you to upgrade. But if you can get by on it, that's fine. If you want something more powerful, I mean, it's pretty much for video editing. It's pretty much migrated to Adobe's products, and which is based on a monthly service fee. So, but they're professional grade, and if you have need for that, I mean, we have it here for ourselves, and we seldom have a need for it, but when we need it, we've got it, and it works really well. So, can we flip back to the call?
Do the
Zoom call. So I thought I had 15 minutes worth of content, and we've been talking for 45 minutes. So I guess at this point, that's all we've got. If you've got questions, we'd love to hear them, or comments. John, can you unmute her?
I think she unmuted.
Yeah. Just wondering, in terms of human power, how much, what would you recommend in terms of number of people that you would need to run like a normal worship service?
I would be a proponent of more is better. But if you have to, the person that's running your audio console needs to run your audio console, and he may be multitasking and running PowerPoint for you or whatever. But we don't want to spread any one person too thin. So I would think you would need at least one more.
Yeah.
And then after that, it would depend on how sophisticated you wanted it to be.
For example, if you had a system with multiple cameras, you might want one person just running the cameras, one person running vMix, switching between the camera shots and pulling up graphics and so on, and one person on the audio board making sure that the audio levels are correct.
So in my church, they're doing it with two people and plus one camera operator where they're using a camcorder. I think a lot of these are scalable, so I think if you keep what you're doing simple, you'll need less people.
Right.
So, like for example, even if you got to a 2-camera system or a 3-camera system, you could set those cameras up and just leave them on those shots. But if you add a person to run that, then they can be a little more creative about, following or changing, a little more variety in the shots. So with vMix, I think vMix is pretty powerful, but I think you could distill it down to something very simple to start out with. And in fact, we would encourage that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
And this may be a really dumb question, but computer-wise, we have limits on what we're doing with USB connections. We've got 2 of the ports are, so we can plug multiple USBs in and run a thing. What's the limit on the typical computer for USB input?
I don't really have an answer for what the limit is. It might be what works well.
Yeah.
But most computers have 2 to 4 ports on them.
Some even more than that.
Some more than that. You can hub those too, can't you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So it depends on how demanding whatever's running on those ports. It depends on what the demand is.
Right. Like you might have the camera and the audio plugged straight into the computer, and then have a mouse and your thumb drive and whatever else running through one of the hubs with multiple inputs on it.
You know, they're inexpensive little hub.
Yeah.
The video is going to be pretty demanding.
Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely going to want a robust computer. You know, the better your computer is, you know, the less chance of there being a hiccup in the stream, or, you know, issues arising that are going to basically make people not watch the stream. You know, things like a solid state hard drive, which is a newer technology, really goes a long way into making the computer run better. Another thing that I actually wanted to mention earlier, you just reminded me of, is your internet connection. So when we typically think about internet, you're looking at your download speed. You know, how fast can I pull information off the internet and download it into my computer? When you're live streaming, it's the opposite. So that's upload speed. So how fast can I push the data from my computer out to the internet to go to that streaming service? You know, I would definitely recommend getting on Google and just typing in internet speed test, and seeing, you know, what your network can handle. You know, and like I said, the upload rate is going to be important, because a lot of times the upload rate is less than the download rate. Other things to consider would be, you know, if you offer Wi-Fi to your guests, you know, is that tied in with the same internet connection that you would be streaming from? And if, you know, everyone's on their phone, you know, checking their email, you know, that might affect your live stream going out. Any other questions? Concerns?
Hey, and another comment, we always default to quality first. So you just have to tell us, we can't afford this. What can we do? Because we're always going to, you know, we're always going to want to put something in there that we've got confidence in. And, but we realize we also have to, you know, the budget's definitely a concern, so we understand that.
Are there any other questions for Video Solutions? Because if not, what I'd like to do is just to turn it over again to you guys and see, have you thought about how we can move into the next phase, which is actually contacting you, setting up appointments either via Zoom or physically, depending on the church and its location and people's comfort level with being around others in this COVID-19 time?
Right. Yeah. So we're flexible. I would say so far we've already worked with one of the churches, and it works pretty well if you can send us like photos from your church, and that'll start the discussion. If we're allowed to come on site, we'll come on site. But even before we come on site, it's always helpful to have some context. So if you could send us maybe a photo of the sanctuary, maybe whatever hardware or whatever equipment you have already, maybe a picture of the audio console, that just will speed things up.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're uncomfortable with us coming on site, we can get pretty far along, even so.
It always helps to have some measurements too, if you know the size of the sanctuary, you know,
Right.
the length and width of the space.
Yes. Does that answer your question, John?
I think it does for me. I would ask, does it answer it for everyone else who's going to be contacting you? I don't operate a church these days myself. So does that seem to make sense to everyone? You're understanding how it works, guys?
Yeah, and if you can send that information to us and then just call us or email us, and probably easiest just to call and we'll set up an appointment.
Great. So what I think we'll do is I will make sure that via an email that I send out that everyone has your contact information, email, all that, phone, and maybe a quick list of the photos and sort of a reminder of listing of what dimensions of the sanctuary and what your current setup is, right? What equipment you currently have, right? Is that, did I more or less capture that? And I'll send that out to folks so that they can begin gathering that, and then they'll contact you and we'll go from there. And for our churches, remember that we are hoping the Presbytery will give you a visit with Video Solutions. We will pay for that, okay? The first time. When you go forward with things, if you go forward with them or not, that's going to be more on you, but we will cover that sort of first consultation appointment, okay? And we will work out how, I will work out with Video Solutions how we're going to fine tune that and get them paid. But I think it'd be easier to have it come through the Presbytery than for them to try to deal with 20 or 30 different churches with different payment schedules and different treasurers and all that. So we'll probably just keep a running list together of who has already availed themselves of the situation and deal with it in that way if that's comfortable with everyone.
And when you, what we've asked for, that's all we need to get started. But if you want to give us any sort of narrative on what you're doing or what direction you want to go, that would be helpful too.
Good.
In a couple sentences, you don't have to write a book or anything.
Great. So watch for that additional email. It'll come out probably not today, probably tomorrow with all the detail and then and the contact, and you can begin to follow up as you feel led with Video Solutions. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay. Any final questions, or we want to thank Video Solutions. In some ways, it's maybe this is the shock and awe webinar because it's dealing with abbreviations and things that we are less familiar with than Old Testament and New Testament and John 3:16, right? So it's a little harder for us to process this quickly, but you have made it very simple for us, and we appreciate that and look forward to continuing the conversation so that digital worship can be something that we do better, not only now, but also as a part of who we are as God's people when we get to be in-person worship and digital worship as well. So thank you all, and we will see Video Solutions back at 2 and watch for more follow-up from the Presbytery on how to contact with them. Thanks.
Very good. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.
Bye.